Hi, this is Alex Georgescu. It felt like after the videos that people found very helpful on, job applications, and I've had great feedback with people saying how those videos were useful for them getting faculty positions. I should also post this about some tips I've gathered for the first few years on the tenure track with a warning that, I just started my year three, so not exactly of old man wisdom here. But that's kind of the point. And hopefully, this will also be helpful for people applying for faculty positions, as it should give you a bit of a background as to what you can ask about. So, some context: I'm a materials theorist in a chemistry department. My preparation includes physics, material science. Postdoc is one of my two postdocs. And um, you know, my chemistry background, I guess, is implicit through research, not courses. Usually, the types of groups that I work in will have will be relatively small, though that's not always the case. Some people run very large groups. And funding tends to be NSF, Department of Energy, Department of Defense. It's quite rare to have NIH funding, but for all intents and purposes, you can probably, sure, in the NIH, every department, maybe NSF is more similar to NIH is maybe more similar to NSF than the other two. Um, One of the things you should figure out as soon as you start, and preferably before you start and choose the place where you're going to be faculty, is how are students covered? Which years do they teach? Do you cover tuition? Is it through fellowships? And generally, what's the general culture in your department or division? So, when are students covered from RAs, and when are they covered from teaching, and what type of fellowships do they get? That should help you also calculate your budget and stuff like this. How do they join groups? How is admissions done? Are they directly to your group? Rotations? Is there an interview pathway? So, for example, at IU, we have rotations, but very often people in my group pick the interview pathway. And they meet other people, and I usually encourage students to meet people who will be on their committee. For undergrad students, do they have sources of summer stipend? Um, do they do research during the school year for class credit or pay? Um, Often there are honors programs that will pay undergraduate students for the summer. So in general, for undergrad students at IU, I've had here over the summer, they have basically always been through some sort of program that paid them a summer stipend. And these are also cool for their CV, got paid by my PI for research isn't as nice as, honors program, something, something. Um, no, these are questions you should have asked during your interview, but they become clear with time. I didn't know, and I don't think I would have remembered all the details during an interview, you know. And then there are questions like, are there classes that are more useful for recruiting undergrads? So, for example, honors chemistry in our case is a first year class that if you get to teach, great. You have some of the top students, and they always want to do research. Can you put, are there cases where you can put a poster around campus or flyers around campus? Um, you know, and undergrad students can really help run your group. Um, you know, I don't think I was a particularly useful undergrad doing research as an undergrad, but in my group, I've had, you know, excellent undergrads. So not, yeah. Um, don't assume people are like you is generally a good assumption. Um, Student recruiting, your first students play an incredibly important role. So, my first undergrad who actually started before anyone else is exceptional. Well, she is exceptional. She just doesn't work with me anymore because she's in grad school. And, interns recruited exceptional grad students who in turn so on. So this creates a cycle. People tend to recruit students like themselves, and someone very strong will actually sometimes scare off people who are intimidated. And that's fine. Okay. For grad students, you may find that students from specific universities may apply to if you have students from there. So, for example, BUET is an amazing engineering school in Bangladesh. People historically did not apply to our department because I'm in chemistry, not engineering. Now that I have an amazing student in my group, there are other students applying from BUET to our department in my group specifically. Um, Drive is more important to students than what students know. Generally, students in my group didn't take quantum before starting. It's and might think, well, it's a theory group. Yeah, people can learn. Harder to teach Drive. Um, And this is something important, something I learned the hard way, which is like, students you can't turn around after trying can take more time than the rest of your group combined. Try and help them find a better match. It's the best thing for you and them and the rest of your group, which actually matters a lot. And the thing to keep in mind is your students aren't just your students, they are also your teachers. They will come up with their own ideas and build a group. This is really cannot be overstated. This is why, again, I think this thing about who you work with is very important. Um, right now, I'm basically trying to get my students' ideas funded much more than mine. Reach out to students early. Encourage top students to start with you over the summer, if that's an option at all. Um, and usually there are options. They basically join as an undergrad, um, and use social media and email and so on. In many cases, students will have applied and not even known you're there if you're a new professor. Maybe when they applied, you weren't even hired yet. So reach out to people, um, and because they should know you exist. Um, I think it's very difficult for me to give student mentorship advice. I know that my own group functions very, very differently than most groups, and that is fine. Um, and that's very important. Um, so it's difficult for me to give advice. Um, What I will say that I think is probably always going to be useful is to learn about mentoring. I found this book particularly useful called 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating Young People. I found it by accident in the local bookstore, so it's pretty popular. And I think the idea here is very good, but maybe works better in my case where I have a small group. Like if my group was 20 people, the way around my group would be impossible. And the idea here is high support and high expectations. And this is how this book defines a mentor. You help people, you give them high expectations, and you also provide high support. Many students, um, you're the main person helping them out, not just with science, but adjusting to a new place, a new type of really a new environment altogether. So, you are a mentor. Okay. And then the thing that the book explicitly kind of asks you to avoid is this idea of high expectations, low support, right? You keep giving, say, people tests or something or pushing them, but you don't show you're there for them. That's kind of enforcer. You have low expectations and high support. You're protecting them, but you're not really making them grow, and that's not helpful for absolutely anybody. Um, and then finally, I don't remember the word they use for low expectation, low support, but I don't know what you're doing if you're providing neither. And yeah, part of your job is to mentor people. They're not just lab hands or whatever. They are You are supposed to be training future leaders in your field or in a related field. Hopefully, they do something different from exactly what you did, right? Um, so with grants, um, you need to know your agencies and you need to know their schedule and you need to reach out to program managers. Um, they want to help you be successful. They obviously can't like specifically take your side on something, but you can usually find the emails on the department websites like NSF, DOE, or whatever. And you can send them a paragraph about the topic you want to apply to or a white paper. And this is very important. So, for example, even if NSF Career doesn't tell you to submit a white paper, you should submit a white paper at least a month in advance of the actual deadline because, you need to be put in the right category for your research to be reviewed and hopefully also get a call with your program manager and you might get some advice. Because different programs will have different standards for review. DOE Early Career, you have a solicitation in January. You have to read it very carefully to assess fit because they take applications in certain very specific topics, and sometimes there's a year A, year B alternate. DOD again, read specific solicitations here. There's a lot of variety, and they actually often change every year. Um, and all of these also, DOD and DOE also have various limitations in terms of when you got your PhD and so on. Private foundation grants, these are even more complicated. They with it depends on which one. Some offer, a lot of money, some offer very little, but a lot of prestige. Um, they're often capped a certain number per department or per institution. So here you want to figure out if there's an awards committee and who can advocate for you to be nominated. With a comment that usually you get these things after you got one of the early career ones. Maybe an exception might be Beckman, which is kind of specifically like you don't have this much money per year yet, so then we'll give you something ourselves. Um, Speaking of, very often there's questions about like how indirect is calculated, and many private foundations, ask for zero indirect. You may then want to see how the rules change depending on the type of funding you get from your particular institution. You want to find people you trust and read each other's proposal. Usually, previous advisors know the standard in your field, and that is very important. I found that in my case, um, it is important to write, for example, about things like the group and my group's success. And this isn't always true in all fields, even within the same um, like agency. Set times to write grants don't work when you feel like it. This is the hardest thing for me to kind of realize. I do often work impulsively. And with grants, you kind of have to just sit in front of your computer, set a time, and do it. This has maybe been the most helpful thing I found while working with others. It also just helps you kind of polish and make something very nice. Teaching and outreach. Um, I'll still put this from the point of view of an R1 institution. Okay, it's generally very strategic to teach a first semester fall graduate class in your field because then your incoming class all gets to know you, which is great. This is also true if you have, say, sophomore, junior undergrad classes. Senior is a bit late, like don't even have a summer undergrad anymore. They're just running away from college at that point. Um, or again, an honors freshman class for undergrads. Preferably have a TA you trust. I generally ask my own grad students, and if the class is more like teaching focused, I try and get someone who's more teaching focused themselves. And communication is key, and hopefully you get along well with your own grad students. So that makes it good to have your grad students help you teach. Set the time to design your lectures and set a cap on it because otherwise you can end up endless amounts of time for something that may not even improve the quality of the of your teaching that much. But it's an opportunity cost. Again, you spend time, optimizing a lecture and you're not applying for a grant or ignoring your students' papers that have been on your desk for a year, right? Like don't do that. Remember, you have many things to manage, and everything you do is an opportunity cost. And no, I don't have any students' paper on my desk for a year. That would be weird. When teaching, say what you'll teach, teach it, and say what you taught. I found this helps prevent confusion. I personally don't take attendance, but I use pass-fail quizzes as a way to indirectly do so. Um, it kind of also helps as a refresher for the students. And I often just go through them and just put in 1 or 0 and canvas myself, and that's fine. Provide ways for students to reach you that are transparent, give them time ahead if you can make office hours, stuff like that. Make sure that you can be reached. Not having office hours is bad. You should have office hours, and usually there are rules about how many office hours you should have for, this much teaching time. Um, and outreach, find innovative things to do. Besides being fun, grant agencies that ask about outreach, like NSF, actually care that you did something new and not part of the given structure. There was an NSF mock panel. By the way, these are things you can look for. The agencies post stuff like this. And a criticism is, well, if you just went to a school that your department already goes to, you're not showing any leadership. You're just, another volunteer. You're a PI. You should have initiative. So this is important. And then depending on the again, the where you're applying, many branches of the NSF do not like, I'll design a new class. They just consider it part of your job. So that's important. So others consider it, something new. You're showing initiative. It really depends. I can tell you that in my case, saying that is not helpful. And they'll be like, okay, fine, this is your job. What are you actually doing that we should actually fund you for? Um, so yeah, this is some advice. So yes, thank you.